is called randori.
Randori is the equivalent of sparring in boxing. It may not look as tough as an MMA fight, but these are the same kind of throws, joint locks, and chokes used by MMA fighters. And they use the same amount of energy. Randori is tough.
At the office, baby.
Hey, these guys are good, man. They have really good technique. They're very well balanced. They're not the strongest guys, not the fastest, but they move really fluid. They don't try to force things. I think we're ready to go down the road and learn some more stuff.
And to do that, we would have to travel back to the ancient training grounds of a 500-year-old line of warriors. We're headed to the mountains east of Okayama, to the isolated dojo home of one of the greatest Jujitsu masters in all of Japan, Takenouchi Sensei. Our translator and guide, a second-degree black belt named Mark Chinnery, led us deep into the hills to meet him.
Konnichiwa.
When the Meiji Restoration of the late 19th century outlawed the samurai, their rituals and practices were all but wiped out. But Takenouchi's family strove to keep their 500-year-old traditions alive, including the practice of sword fighting and Jujitsu. Once employed by his samurai ancestors to kill, Takenouchi Sensei's system, Takenouchi-Ryu, was sure to put us in the right mindset for our fight against a judo champion.
The patron gods of Takenouchi-Ryu were Marishtan, the goddess of war, and Atago, the god of thunder and fire. Placing a ceremonial gift of sake in front of their shrines, we prayed that they'd guide and protect us during our training.
After the ceremony, Takenouchi Sensei led us to a sacred spot. A mountaintop shrine dedicated to the founding of his family's martial art. Legend has it that in 1532, Sensei's ancestor, Takenouchi Hisamori, came to these mountains to train in isolation. His chosen weapon was the longsword.
And he was practicing on longsword, and then that's when the god talked to him and said, the longsword's okay, but you should be doing short sword techniques as well. And so that's when he started mastering the short sword technique. And then from there, because they're so close, then it went hand to hand.
A samurai would often carry a set of short swords with his longsword. Together, this pairing was known as Disho and symbolized the elite status of a samurai warrior. But his encounter with the spirit convinced Takenouchi Hisamori to focus his techniques not on his longsword, but on the close-in combat of chokes, gouges, throws, and bone breaking that were to become the basics of Jiu-Jitsu.
It's interesting to learn we come to the top of the mountain, and this is where Takenouchi's ancestors developed Jiu-Jitsu, from the long sword to the short sword to Jiu-Jitsu, which eventually bred Judo. And it's really intriguing to learn that thousands of people all over the world practice Judo because of that.
Now it was time for us to get to work. But the sensei trained old school. There were no mats for us.
Wooden floors, bed joints don't go well together.
Wooden floors and jumping as hard as you can onto them, slamming your feet into them, and then your hand doesn't feel good.
Oh, I think Bill dented the floor a few times.
I think the floor dented me.
The first thing Takenouchi Sensei taught us was the importance of reading our opponent's momentum. Each move we make, from sliding our feet to twisting our hips or dropping a shoulder, changes our momentum. And the same is true for our opponents.
Only by understanding how to see and exploit these changes would we be able to know when to use the attacks that we've learned. When to go for the hip throw, the armbar, or the sacrifice throw.
He's pulling him down, and Bill's natural reaction is to try and pull himself back up. So when he's pulling himself back up, then he's going to try and use his momentum to pull him down.
Instead of trying to force your opponent one way, you take him one way and you let him put himself the other way, and you just help guide him. It's much easier to guide your opponent's energy off course than it is to meet it on course.
Leveraging your opponent's momentum enables even the smallest fighter to gain dominant position, the key to any fight. In Jiu-Jitsu, you'd use dominant position to kill your opponent. In Judo, you use it to score points.
This is one technique. It's breaking your opponent's balance and using that to throw him. Getting lower than your opponent and using your legs to throw him, that's Judo, but then the kick afterwards is Jujutsu.
So basically all the striking arts are taken away in Judo because it's really not competitive to throw somebody then kick them in the head.
It's competitive, it just might not be sportsmanlike.
No. Training with the descendants of real samurai on top of a mountain, this is really intense. This isn't just something that was built for sports. This is something that was built out of warfare, and they still use it today in Judo.
As the sun set, we went outside. We'd pushed ourselves hard, but in the process, we'd begun to harness the power of our own minds and bodies. But to the east, our clash with the champion still loomed. To survive, we'd both have to continue to push ourselves. Sensei helped ease our throbbing muscles with strong words of encouragement.
I think he's saying we did a good job, but we got more to learn.
Early the next morning, it was back to work. Instead of their fists, Sensei's students were packing staffs.
So from here on in, we want you guys soon to be able to read your opponent's moves.
That's
Be able to block it.
So this is about reading your opponent's moves before they come at you. That's how it translates to Judo. We're not going to be taking a stick with us onto the Judo mat, but we have to be able to read what our opponent does and react to it.
As the speed and intensity of the exercises increased, we began to sense where he would move next. To visualize the attacks and to counter them.
But we didn't just work our minds. We also worked on our strength by running through the steep mountains and by chopping wood. Being here has really enveloped 3 different principles: body, mind, spirit. We've strengthened our body through being thrown into hardwood floors and training with each other. Mind, we've learned our techniques over and over and over again and practiced them. And spirit, on a visceral level, now we're moving into things like knowing our opponent and what he's going to do and being able to react